Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Tammy Renyard. I'm a district principal in Victoria. So shout out to Victoria and to the rest of you for being here in December after school to learn with us. We'd like to acknowledge that Victoria is located on the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt people. We feel so grateful to live, learn, and work here. Excited today to learn with you and to have Leighton and Shelley with us as we have a more than a provincial conversation. We have folks joining us from all over Canada and beyond. So very excited to be here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Leighton to get us started. Thanks, folks.
Thanks so much, Tammy. This is part 2 in this year's webinar series. Yay, raise the roof and eat your snacks. Hi, Christy. And so we're so delighted to have Shelley joining us for this session. There are our little Twitter handles. I will begin this opening session, or this opening chunk of time, hey Nina, with a little recap from last time and a little bit of anchoring. And then the next 2 chunks after that will be with Shelley. You are welcome.
Leighton, we need you to unmute.
You're muted, Leigh.
Did you hear me say anything yet, everybody? Oh, I said so many good things. Did you see my mouth moving?
You cut out about halfway through.
All right. Sook, did you hear me give you a shout out yet? Oh, hey, Sook. Okay. So peeps in the house, just want you to know that you're welcome here, that your practice, your voice are valued and needed. And we are a place of diversity welcoming. So there's not a right practice. It's all of us growing our practice together in community. Am I still hearable? Audible? Thanks, Nina. This is a series, and so this is year 2 of this series, which is bringing together middle years educators from across BC and apparently further, but Loa, don't worry. Nanaimo is still very central to our heart. Shelley is joining us for today's session, and we're just so grateful to have her here with us. I would like to begin by clicking on the next slide. Hey, Ryan. There we go. I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you from the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan peoples. This is where I live and I learn and I research together with the land and its inhabitants, human and more than human. I'm so fortunate to be partnered with the Penticton Indian Band in ongoing research around welcoming Indigenous ways of knowing. I'm grateful and respectful of this place and the countless generations of Indigenous peoples who have cared for it. And I acknowledge, respect, and honor the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And just as I continue to work on my decolonizing practice, I've been using maps that instead of showing colonial BC, show Indigenous language groups and peoples of British Columbia. It's just one step forward. And you can find that colorful map on my website, ruralteachers.com, and you're welcome to use it in any way you'd like. Disrupt people, decolonize, disrupt, hashtag. Thank you, Josh Campbell, for that smile. We will also be using liberating structures throughout the session, which simply mean that there'll be one opportunities where we'll get together in small groups after the first chunk, another time when we'll be using a structure where we just type into the chat box. But the idea is that we really want to hear your voices, that we really want to make a space to connect across the province and beyond in terms of the work that we're doing. So it's not here's what to do, but here's what we are doing. And we just want to make sure that anyone who might be a teacher candidate at this time, Natasha has changed her hair yet again for me today, that wherever you are in your practice, you have a practice and you have a voice as an educator. And so we encourage everyone to participate and not think I'm not ready for this. Rather, we're never ready, people, and we're ever ready. Thank you so much. Okay. Here comes the recap, friends. So all of last year's series and in our first series last time, we just anchored ourselves together around current research and theory around middle years pedagogy and philosophy, that we are committed to the students that we have and we recognize them as magnificent humans who are in development, and our job is to come to them, not to expect them to come to us. and that the practices that we engage in need to be active and exploratory, challenging, and where possible, even integrative, where we're helping kids build bridges across contexts. And also just recognizing that there's a significant role for us as middle years educators in supporting the development of our students' identities. Recognizing that at this time and at this age, one of the most important things that we can do is not just be a model, but be a mentor. And recognize that the things that we do and that we say are helping our students in a time when they are in what's called identity moratorium. We talked about that in last year's series. And so they actually need support in their development because they are in exploration time. Sorry, that was middle year's humor. We have explorations in middle year. Anyway, exploration time. But central to everything is this notion that we're valuing diversity, that we're welcoming diversity, and that we're nurturing diversity. With me still? Okay, good answer. That was the recap of all of last year in one slide. So session one, I talked about we have Alaska in the house. Hey, Karen Martin. So in the previous session, we really focused on responsive teaching and informative assessment. And this is the book that we've been using as our anchor text. You don't need to read it unless you're from WACTEP, and then apparently you do. But really, friends, this anchor idea or chapter really talked about this notion of really learning from our kids. And our teaching is actually working with Tara Bertoya. Shut the front door, friends. People, I just feel like either 25 years younger or older, I'm not sure. So we talked a little bit about the notion, actually quite a bit last time, around the notion that responsive practice and responsive teaching is actually about seeking out kids' perspectives, getting to know them and what they value and what they're interested in. And then we create curriculum together based on who they are, not just something that a document tells us. We're operating from the concept of curriculum that's not, here's an outcome from somebody else, but curriculum is something that we make together based on who we are. And that if we're really looking at an ethical practice, we also need to be honest with our students that we're learning just as much as they are, if not more, from them. And so it really creating a space in our classrooms where we are creating ourselves and we are developing ourselves together. And I just want to anchor this incredible work that's been happening in the world in the last few years around really being conscious of our language and how our language helps shape not just who we are, but how we think about ourselves and how we recognize ourselves. And so the language that we use with our students needs to be not just invitational, but affirming, positive, and welcoming. And so when I use words like peeps or folks or friends or co-learners, it's recognizing that I'm making space for everyone in my community, regardless of their backgrounds and interests, but most importantly, because I want who they are to be welcomed in this space. And I just popped up those same books from last time, that this work that we're doing is not based in some old white guy that looks like Santa Claus. That's me, in case you're wondering, but that this work has been happening for decades, thanks to folks like Gloria Ladson-Billings, Paula Ferrer, Sarah Ahmed, and Colleen Beers and Rob Probst has that beautiful Disrupting Thinking book that's out. With me still, friends? Yes, Tamara Maloff. People, my entire teaching career is just based in this space right now. We have very good Kootenai representation, I'm just saying. There we go. Also, in this work of responsive teaching and pedagogy, we can draw on what we have in British Columbia are the First Peoples Principles of Learning, which Indigenous nations from across British Columbia said these are some ways that we can agree in terms of what we value in our cultures. But regardless of where you're joining us from, when we invite Indigenous perspectives into our teaching and learning, it really helps us recognize that we're focusing on the gifts that students bring. Most Indigenous languages, in fact, all of them in British Columbia, don't have a word for special education. Instead, they have language that says, welcome every child's gift around the circle to recognize what they can offer to our community. Also from an Indigenous perspective, with the First Peoples Principles in line, we're really thinking about inviting our students to express themselves and who they are and what they're noticing about themselves and who they're becoming. It's really a reflective place where we can be together, reflecting and growing ourselves. And middle years philosophy and pedagogy is so much about welcoming and building our voices in a space, because if we can't hear ourselves as 12, 13, or 50-year-olds, if we can't practice hearing ourselves and valuing ourselves and knowing ourselves in this safe space, how on earth are we going to be brave in other parts of our lives where everyone doesn't know us or agrees with us or just thinks that a 13-year-old is a troublemaker, rather a change maker? And then lastly, we really think from an Indigenous perspective around collective ways of knowing, that we all take care of each other, that we all make a space for each other. Shout out to session 4 in this series when we're going to talk about social emotional learning with Miriam Miller. Jeff Slack, great to see you, my friend. SD48 in the house. And then the one other piece we talked about last time is, so how do we build this practice with our kids? And so we talked about developing a class profile where we get to know our kids' strengths and stretches, but also the centrality of not saying, here's what I see in that kid, but hearing from kids who they see themselves as, asking kids what they love to do, what they like to do with their friends or their parents, their favorite way to show what they know. Hey, Nammer. What they want to be when they get older, what their hopes and dreams are. We need to be not just giving students voice, but receiving their feedback to help us grow and build what we're doing. We want to empower our learners with the assessment practices that we're using. Bonjour, Elisa. And then we also talked just ever so briefly around the power of using open-ended prompts in a literacy assessment, right? Instead of right and wrong questions, actually saying, what do you think is here? What do you think is going on? What do you think is important? What connections are you making, Kristen Weens? Whatever it is, we're welcoming our students to use their knowledge, and that is literacy, rather right or wrong comprehension questions, right? And so then we can guide what we do from seeing students thinking and seeing students practices versus this notion of literacy as something that's kind of finite and checkable versus literacy as a practice that comes from who we are and what we do and what we see and what we notice. And when we use those open-ended prompts in our spaces and in our assessment, kids get used to thinking and sharing versus thinking, why would I even share this when it's not what you're looking for? You know what I'm looking for as a middle years teacher? I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you and your thinking and your voice, and it's probably going to grow us all. So many Julies on the screen right now. Wow. Julie's in the Kootenays. Julie's in the Lower Mainland. You're on the same screen, Julie Nash and Julie Wildemand. It's wild. It's wild. There we go. And then using whatever information we have, looking at students' work, looking on what they do on a literacy assessment, what they share with us, we say, so what can my students do? What do they need? And that's how I plan my teaching. I look at my curriculum based on what my students are giving me, not starting from my curriculum to do my plan. My curriculum is a resource to me. And then after, I don't know, a few weeks, who knows? Does anybody know what month it is right now? Anyone keeping track of, is it still September? I'm still at the September pace, I have to say. I know it's December, I know. We'll all be okay. Hashtag yes, we will all be okay together. But we do want to, after been teaching for a while, stop and say, are my students growing, right? Not assuming they're getting it and not assuming that they're not getting it, but saying, okay, and now what's my next step? So it's almost like slow food, everybody. It's slow teaching. Teach, practice, try some more, get better. Now here's where we're going next. But it's really growing competencies. And for those of you who are like into competency-based curriculum, wink, it should be all of you. We've actually been doing this work as responsive teachers for at least 40 years in BC, right? Notice your kids, grow your kids, hear their thinking. It's the curriculum caught up to us, not we're trying to implement some new curriculum. If you're from away, this is the work we do anyway. So like, don't be like, if I'm not in BC, can I do this? You totally can do this. Yes. I know things are happening in the chat box. I'm just not looking. Okay. So the other thing we talked about is this notion of when you're building competence, that we really have to start with making whatever the thing is that we're teaching explicit. If we're going to build a competency, we just can't give kids an activity and say, hey, grow your competency, good luck. We have to model what it looks like. We have to practice it out and try it with kids. We got to practice. French immersion teachers, are you in the house today? We know this in our core, right? We know that you have to have a curriculum and a language goal in terms of what we have to do. But guess what, non-immersion teachers, so do we, right? Here's a content goal, but here's also a language or a competency goal that we're working for. But we have to model what that looks like. We got to try it out together. And we practiced that with the image set last time. We also talked ever so briefly about the idea of open-ended strategies like connect, process, and transform, which you can watch the webcast from last time if you want, because I have to keep moving along. But I do have this good-looking graphic organizer where we just collected a few of these open-ended strategies. If you're looking for some of them, chapter 3 in that green It's All About Thinking book are there. But I also gave a shout out to Doug Buell last time, Buehl, who has a beautiful book around interactive learning that is filled with these open-ended strategies as well. Okay, so let's bring us to our focus for today. Our two questions for today are, what's the importance of deep learning? And why is teaching with a big idea in mind important? We're focusing on chapter 4 in the Green Book. That's what today's focus is. And so the curriculum we need, deep learning needs to be about something. We're exploring something. And so competency-based learning is important, but it has to be learning about something. You got to use your competence for something, friends. And the whole notion that when we're exploring something, you learn it over time. We can't think we taught it today, you should get it. It's more like explore some more, let's figure it out some more. Those are some of my friends in the Northwest Territories that I've been working with at a middle school. So backward design, which Shelley's going to talk about in one of the next chunks, really is about building kids' interest over time, hooking them and building their interest, working with a big idea that's central to whatever we're teaching. And I like to think of it as engaging learners on a quest. We are on our way to figure something out, and I can't wait to figure out what that is. Sometimes my voice sounds just like that when I do it with the kids, and then they call me Schnelly. And then the other thing we just want to remember is if we're going to explore a big idea for a while, we have to keep tapping into kids' background knowledge, helping them make connections, and really seeking out diverse resources and information and perspectives. We get to know a big idea by seeing it from multiple perspectives, right? I'm not anti-textbook. I'm just pro-crystals, which means your textbook's just one of the facets on your crystals. What are some other things that we can look at to help us understand? Our curriculum in British Columbia has a big idea orientation. I'm not sure how that happened, but I was on the committee. That was humor, Robin. You can receive it or reject it with your new orange hat. So the bigger picture really is working with big ideas over time with an inquiry spirit. Even when we're direct teaching, it's always with the spirit of, I wonder what we could learn. I wonder what's going on. What could we figure out more? And we're really not covering the curriculum. We're uncovering a big idea. And we're never really done because there's always more to figure out. So let me show you just one example as I come to send you into your breakout groups in a moment. So here's an example which I have to unshare and reshare, unshare and reshare, unshare and reshare. Stop sharing. I'm just going to talk my way through it, Sarah Wood. Hey, Super Sarah. And then I need to share screen. This is so exciting. And here it comes. This is Kim Ondrick and Danica Hardy's example. And so here's what they did. They said, hey kids, hey peeps, we are going to be provoking our thinking about social justice. This provocation covers just a few curriculum outcomes. And this is a grade 7, 8, 9 class. combined class. And so relationships between decimals and fractions and percents and circle graphs. And we're going to look at ratios and percents more and less than 100, because that's what we do in grade 8. And rates and proportional reasoning and probability and statistics in society. Yes, Jess Kyle. Yes, I'm not kidding. Also, guess what? We're going to look at misleading statistics, because the best statistics are looking at things that are misleading, because we can critically think. You might also realize that there are big ideas in numeracy or math. And so these are our big ideas. Numeracy helps us to see patterns, communicate ideas, and solve problems. We can apply mathematics to inquiry questions and use it to communicate information and data help us to draw conclusions and make predictions in an unstable world. We've never needed numeracy more than we need it now. So, hey, students, you're going to have to find, sorry, I should have said peeps. Hey, peeps, you're going to have to find a social issue or an epidemic or a disaster that agitates you. Something that you don't want to see happen again. You're also going to have to figure out who you're going to work with in your group. You got a choice on who you're going to work with. It's great if you extend yourself beyond who you've worked with this year. Now, because there's a possibility or a threat of reoccurrence of this incident, your responsibility is to find numerical data, which describes the impact of this particular incident. But you need to triangulate your data, not just one source. Make sense of the numerical data using charts and graphs, but you have to use fractions, ratios, and percents, because we're doing proportional thinking, not fractions. Big idea, competency, not just a skill. And then you're going to develop some solutions and share what that means to the entire class, because you're going to be presenting to the United Nations of Vernon Community School, which is just a fancy way of saying each other. Is my mic off? I'm usually really amusing as I share this example. Thanks, Jen Skelding. I appreciate you. Great. Now, friends, you're going to have to consider some things as you go. I feel like I just skipped by an entire page there. Woo! You're going to, in your research, have to answer a few particular things. You're going to have to think about who was affected, how many people in total. What can you find in terms of data related to different groups? The more kinds of subcategories you have, the more you can cross-compare, Casey Cook. Did the number of people affected change over time? And if so, that probably will tell you something. And then it's good to have as much information as you can, because you don't know which is the right information, right? So that helps you in your gathering. Now, I just want you to know, friends, that along the way, we'll be doing some mini lessons around statistical approaches so that you can apply them. And before you go to compile your data, you're going to have to show me that you can do these things. So we'll be teaching them along the way, but this is almost like a test for you and for me to say, are you ready? And I might have to do a little mini lesson along the way, Mike H. It just might be possible. Are you with me, friends? Sorry, I'm back to you, teachers. I know you're like, am I 14? Am I not 14? But here's just one example of big idea teaching, building inquiry over time in terms of getting engaged. All right, I feel like it's time to go do some small groups, which means I have to unshare and reshare. Tammy, are you almost ready back there? Or is it Dave? Who's doing
I'm ready. Are we going 9 minutes?
We are going 9 minutes. And I would just love to share my screen so you can see the prompt, everybody. Here we go, share. I have a seeing eye dog snoring behind me. It's very soothing and yet mildly threatening. Here we go. So your prompt is, oops, I hope you could see in that example that kids had choice, that there was some cross-curricular integration, and also chances for you and for kids to not just know where they're going, but get some feedback. So now you're heading to a group, your conversation cafe. You'll be in a group of about 5. We invite you in your group of 5 to take 1 minute just to talk about, what does this make you think of? And if you still have time after sharing, you can just have a popcorn conversation. But we encourage you to use the protocol to make space for each other. The temptation otherwise is to talk for too long and somebody doesn't get a space. And so we're using equity-oriented practices, not just with kids, but as adults. Have a great conversation. Rachel Lacroix, this is getting better and better. What connections can you make to your practice from that nice little opening around big idea teaching and/or responsive instruction? See you soon.